Yes, you may.
State's Exhibit 28 was taken at the scene. And if you would note whether there's any blood present in that photograph.
Yes, there's some blood around the nipple.
And if you would look at State's Exhibit 95, which was represented as being taken at the time of the autopsy, but before the body was cleaned. Do you see any blood in that picture?
No. In the original photo, there's a stream of blood running down from the nipple, down from the wound to the nipple, and that's missing in this photograph.
Evidently, someone cleaned it.
Yeah, it's been cleaned.
Question as to argumentative and speculation.
Sustained is to speculation, overruled is to argumentative.
Thank you.
Dr. DeMeyer, the last two photographs that were shown, do
Yes.
you remember what the ones that were shown?
Yeah,
One
that's
at
the,
scene.
I'm sorry, what?
I apologize. May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yeah, the gunshot wound, one taken at the scene,
One
allegedly.
taken at the scene, State's Exhibit 28. Doesn't that show that the sweatshirt is up,
Yeah, but it's been pulled up.
right? And if it's at the scene while they're transporting the body, and the body comes to the medical examiner's office with the sweatshirt down, wouldn't that absorb the blood there?
May I see the other photograph?
Sure.
Well, since it's not here, it's been removed, so it's been pulled off. So if you're asking me, could it have wiped the blood up as it was being pulled off? Sure.
In other words, you would expect the blood in the sweatshirt, correct?
Right.
Now, you were asked a bunch of questions by Mr. West. You agree that Mr. West testifying is not evidence, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And would you use Mr. West's statements to form your opinion?
No, sir, I used the autopsy report and the laboratory reports to form my opinion.
And the autopsy report, that was the one that you mentioned prepared by Dr. Bell, correct?
Right, and the photographs plus the firearms report to form my opinion, yes, sir.
And you agree there was an absence of any x-rays or other actual proof of a broken nose, correct?
That's correct, sir.
And you agree that there was absence of documentation of any kind of concussion or brain injury or brain bleeding, correct?
Oh, yes, sir.
And you agree that there was absence of any proof of anything being washed off the victim's body?
I can't say whether it was washed or not. What I said is that if that shirt was lying on there and they pulled it off, they could have wiped off some of the blood. And that's why you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to take the photograph of the wound intact before you clean it. And so there was a big no-no there,
Okay.
either way.
Are you saying that at the scene, the medical examiner personnel should remove the clothing of the victim, or should the clothing remain on the victim until he's transported to the ME's office?
No, what I'm saying is that the clothing should remain on the body, so the photograph taken at the scene, that's proper. But when they got to the medical examiner's office, they shouldn't have pulled, if they wanted photographs of the scene as received, they shouldn't have undressed the body or pulled anything off, because they would be wiping it. And then the rest of the whole chest is clean and such. So, you know, the techniques weren't exactly correct, let's put it that way.
But you did rely on Dr. Bao's report in terms of his findings, correct?
I had no other choice, sir.
Okay. And based on your observations of the photographs, they document what occurred in terms of the gun, right?
Yeah.
You're not disputing that?
Right, the photographs of the wound were the best thing.
Do you have absence, is there any absence of evidence that anything was washed by the rain?
It would have to be, you'd have to know how much it's raining there, and you'd have to have an observation.
Pure
It could be
speculation.
washed away by the rain.
Pure speculation, correct?
Yeah, unless you were there and saw how much it was washed away.
And there was an absence of vomiting, right? You didn't see any vomiting out there, correct? And finally, you were asked about John Good, what he testified. Do you agree that a jury that heard John Good's testimony should rely on what he said on the witness stand? Correct? And here's what I'm getting at.
It's kind of interesting. If he's got a good statement at the time and then he testifies something else on the witness stand, you begin to wonder.
Okay.
You know? I mean, I think that's up for the jury to consider.
Right. My question is, if John Good testified he neither saw nor heard any blows landing, and neither saw nor heard anything being slammed on the sidewalk, does the physical evidence, is that what then you rely on?
No, I wouldn't. I told you I didn't rely anything on his statement.
Oh, you completely disregarded John Good?
No, I disregarded the witnesses because the problem what I was trying to do was essentially take Mr. Zimmerman's statement and see whether the physical evidence was supported it or invalidated his statements.
So,
because the witnesses, you know, they're all over the place. You can't use the witnesses to make autopsy decisions.
but isn't what George Zimmerman, the defendant, is relaying to the police, isn't he affect a witness in terms of what happened?
Yes.
Okay.
But that's why you don't believe him and you do the tests and look at the autopsy to check what he said matches what you find at the body.
Right. And what you did is you relied on one of his statements, and the bottom line is what you could say is the gun was out and it was 2 inches from the body.
2 to 4 inches
I'm sorry,
from
2
the
to 4
body.
inches,
Right.
correct? Thank you.
One very narrow area. On this notion of the absence of evidence not being evidence of absence notion, if Mr. Good didn't testify that he heard George Zimmerman's head hitting cement like this in some way, does that in any way mean that Mr. Zimmerman's head didn't actually get hit on the cement?
No.
Same thing, if Mr. Good didn't hear Trayvon Martin hit George Zimmerman in the head like this, does that mean George Zimmerman didn't get hit in the head to cause the injuries that you saw?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. May Dr. DeMaio be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Witness, please. Your next witness is?
I'm sorry, Your Honor. 1 moment. Mr. Bonaparte, Your Honor. Sorry for the delay.
And his first name is? Okay, we'll ask him when he gets on the stand.
Norton. Sorry.
You solemnly swear from the testimony presented will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you.
May we approach him
Yes.
very briefly?
You may proceed, yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. State your name, please.
Norton N. Bonaparte Jr.,
And your occupation?
City Manager, City of Sanford, Florida.
How long have you been so employed?
A year and a half.
And you were employed then back in February of 2012 when this event happened, correct?
That is correct.
I want to focus your attention, if I might, on a very particular event, and that is the event that surrounds the playing of a what we now know to be a 911 call to the Martin family. Okay?
Okay.
I understand that there were some decisions that were made getting us to that point. We're not concerned or going to inquire into the reason. I only want to talk to you about the actual event, okay?
Okay.
I'd like you to focus on that. My understanding is, and if I might be given some leeway to lead a slight bit to focus the witness, my understanding is that that a decision was made to play the tape for the Martin family, correct?
The decision was made to play a number of tapes.
Correct, including, and I know that there were several tapes that were played. Those were police evidence tapes of the investigation surrounding this event, correct?
There was the 911 and the non-emergency number.
Yeah, several of them, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I want to focus your attention particularly on one, though I realize that several were played. When the decision was made to play those tapes, who actually took care of the process of playing the tapes?
It was the mayor's office, and it was myself and the mayor.
Okay, so both you and the mayor actually did the physical playing of the tapes, correct?
To the best of my recollection.
Okay. Was there any conversation with law enforcement before that as to how to accomplish the playing of the tapes for these witnesses before it happened?
At that point, they weren't witnesses, they were parents.
Is that a no?
Please repeat the question.
Yeah, okay. The question was whether or not you had any conversation with law enforcement as to how to play these tapes to these people. You say they weren't witnesses, let's just call them people. Were there any conversations with law enforcement as to how to accomplish this playing of the tapes, yes or no?
No.
Okay. So that you just, did you and the mayor just decide on your own as to how they would be played?
The decision was made to make them public, the purpose of showing them to the Martin family so they heard it first as a courtesy to the family.
Absolutely. I understand both the courtesy and the sensitivities that you were dealing with, sir. My focus is a little bit different than that, however, okay? Here's my focus.
Okay.
When the actual decision to make the tapes play for the Martin family, was it your decision? Was it the mayor's decision as to how that would occur?
The decision was made just to allow them to hear them.
Okay. Was there any consideration given to the idea of playing them to those individuals separately, one separate from the other, so as to not infect their view or what they heard one to the other?
No, there was not.
So the way that it occurred, then we know from other testimony, was that the tape was played, and again, I know that there were several tapes. The tapes were played with the entire family present in one room, correct?
That is correct.
And were you the one playing the tapes?
I don't recall exactly who was playing it. We used a computer.
Well, if you would, give us the setting as to who was doing what with the tapes.
It was a disc that we were using a laptop so that they can hear the tapes.
Yes, sir. And who was doing what?
I don't recall specifically. It was either myself or the mayor.
Who was present?
The mayor, the Martin family, and the attorneys, Mr. Crump and Miss Natalie Jackson, and the Trayvon's brother, and then there was another individual, and I don't know his name.
Was there any law enforcement present?
No.
Was that a decision that you and or the mayor made to keep law enforcement out of the room?
We had asked the family, I asked the family if they wanted law enforcement, and they said they'd rather have law enforcement not in the room at the time, and so we obliged their request.
And did you discuss that with Chief Lee in regard to his desire to be in the room?
At that point, we just informed the chief as well as the other officers to not be in the same room.
Do you recall how many times the tape was played?
Which tape?
Let's focus on the 911 tape that had these screams for help on it.
No, I do not.
Were you there for all the times that it was played?
I was in the vicinity. I wasn't always in the room.
Okay. Was either you or the mayor, that's Mayor Tripley, correct?
That is correct.
Was either you or he in the room at all times the tape was being played?
I do not recall.
How many times was the tape played while you were in the room?
I do not recall.
More than one?
The tape that has the screams, yes, that was played more than once.
And was that at the request of anyone in particular?
I believe it's at the request of the family.
Anyone in particular in the family?
I do not recall.
Did they give you any reasons for why they wanted to hear it more than once?
I think they just wanted to hear it again.
Did they make, did you record or take any notes as to any responses they had regarding what they heard on the one tape of particular concern?
No, I did not.
Did you record the event of this happening in any form or fashion so that law enforcement or others might have it?
No, we did not.
Was it recorded by audio or video?
No, it was not.
Was anyone there like a court reporter just to document exactly how it occurred?
No, it was not.
Was any consideration given by you or the mayor at all to do it in a fashion that could record it should law enforcement or anybody else need it for future purposes?
We were releasing it to the media that evening, and we just wanted the family to have the courtesy of hearing it first, and we did not have it recorded.
Okay, and I'm sorry, so I don't mean to banter with you. My question was fairly specific as to whether or not you gave any consideration to the concept of recording it so that if law enforcement or anybody else in the future needed it, it would be recorded. That event of the first time half a dozen family members listened to that tape was recorded at all. Is that a yes or a no?
It's a no.
Just a moment, Your Honor. And just to be clear, the attorneys that you say were present were not city attorneys, they were the Martin family attorneys, correct?
That is correct.
The only two people representing anybody in Sanford, from law enforcement to the police, law enforcement to the administration, was yourself and May Triplett.
That is correct.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Part, the bottom line was that it was the decent thing to do to play it for the family before it was released to the public,
That was our intent.
and that's why it occurred the way it did. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, sir.
Any redirect?
No, thank you.
Thank you. May Mr. Bonaparte be excused?
Yes, Your
Thank you very much, sir. You are excused. Please call your next witness.
Honor. I hate to approach. There's a witness that we want to appear in a unique way. I want to talk to the court about that, if I might. And I didn't know if this might be a time for the jury to take a break at 3:10.
Well, why don't you approach first and find out. Doing okay? Please be seated. Court will be in recess for 15 minutes.
Witness on an iPad, ready to go. We are just trying to get this witness on that screen, and we're close, I think.
Okay, and the witness knows to have the do not disturb on there.
Yes, actually, we've used a program that isn't susceptible to that.
All right, so we'll wait for the jury to come in until we have this up and going.
Yes, Your Honor, I think that would make sense. My client, I've just discussed with him, and he is okay that we present this witness through this fashion.
Okay, is that correct, Mr. Zimmerman? Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you very much. You could be seated. Yes, you may.
Hello again. Okay, great, perfect. I'm going to just try and move this as cautiously as I can so as to not move you. Sit tight for just a second. Okay. You need to show a photograph? You need an example. Eloise, I'm going to show you something through a camera. I want you to tell me if you can see it, okay? You can't really see me right now because the camera's pointing up, correct?
Correct.
Can you see a document that I'm showing you?
Yes.
Okay. That's the way I mean. No, you really can't see it there, but you can. Thank you, Ron. And just for your planning purposes, we've canceled a couple witnesses based upon some of the testimony, so at this point, this will be my last witness, and we will go into the proffers of both experts. It's a little early, but that also compressed everything down, so we're probably going to be done tomorrow.
Okay, let's
So-
bring the jury in.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. This is the microphone we're talking to this. This was to pick it up to.
She won't be able to see. Will she be able to hear the clerk to swear her in?
Yes, you can hear me now, Eloise, correct?
Yes.
Madam Clerk, would you just introduce yourself as,
My name is Lisa.
can you hear that?
Yes.
You just heard Lisa, perfect.
Very fresh, Ron.
Please be seated. Mr. O'Meara, call your next witness.
The defense would call Eloise Dillagard, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Dillagard, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, the clerk, Lisa, is going to swear you in. You'll be requested to raise your right hand. So I would ask that you do that, and if you would.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm testimony presented will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am, and I first want to thank you. I understand that you're homesick, and appreciate you spending some time with us today. I think I've asked you your name. Tell me your name again.
Eloise Dillagard.
Okay, and and if you would spell your last name.
D as in David, I-L-L-I, G as in Gary, A-R-D as in David.
Thank you, ma'am. And back in February of 2012, did you live at the retreat at Twin Lakes?
Yes.
How long had you lived there at the point of February 2012?
By that time, it was about 2.5 years.
Okay. You have since moved out of that location, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I want to take you back to the time that you lived at the retreat at Twin Lakes and ask you if you knew somebody by the name of George Zimmerman.
I did.
And how long had you known him?
Ever since we moved in October of '09.
Would you consider yourselves friends?
He was my neighbor. We spoke on a friendly basis, had no problems with one another.
Okay. And were there times that you became aware that he was involved in a program called Neighborhood Watch?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever see him in the neighborhood patrolling or doing anything like that as part of Neighborhood Watch?
No,
But you did know him as a friend or a neighbor?
as a neighbor, a friendly neighbor.
Okay. And focus your attention now, if I might, on February 26th, which of course is the night that Trayvon Martin was shot. Do you remember that night?
I do.
What I'd like you to do, if you would, is to tell the jury what first brought your attention to the event that you eventually came out or came to find out was the shooting we're talking about.
I was coming from Walmart down Reinhardt to go to Oregon and make a left, and a policeman approached me from the rear. And of course I thought, well, I didn't do anything wrong, but then I only to find out he wanted to go around me, so I pulled over. And as I was coming up Oregon to go into my neighborhood, I noticed that the police were going into the neighborhood. So when I pulled in, I looked down from the mail station down to the left and saw that there was crime scene tape going up, and I didn't want to go directly down, so I came around the right-hand side where I lived to go around the back way and asked a couple of guys that were standing outside, and they told me they didn't know what's going on, but there was another policeman coming. So I then proceeded to come back around and go back around by the mail station toward the crime scene area.
Okay. And do you recall what the weather was like during that time?
It was very rainy that night.
Okay. And at some point, as you got closer to what you call the crime scene, did you notice any vehicles that were familiar to you?
Yes,
And whose
I
vehicle?
did.
And what vehicles were they?
It was George's truck.
And could you describe that if you would?
I believe it's a gray Honda Ridgeline.
Okay. If you could, tell the jury as best you can where within this area you noticed the truck.
Because of the way our road is for Retreat View Circle, it was more like on the curb or nearing the curb down by where the crime scene was.
Okay, let me ask it this
Which I
way.
believe was on Retreat View Circle. I'm not really sure exactly.
Okay. Do you know the area that has come to be known as the T intersection, which is very close to where the incident itself occurred?
Yes.
And though you may not have known the names then, there's a woman who lives in the end unit right by that T intersection by the name of Jenna Lauer. Do you know her?
No, I don't.
Okay. If we were to, I would ask for you to accept as a premise that she was living in that first condo or townhome just at the intersection of the T intersection and the sidewalk. Would you know what I was talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And to fast forward a moment, this was an area where you had testified in deposition that you actually had some conversations with police. So I'm just trying to geographically locate. If we were to presume that Jenna Lauer's townhome was that first one in that row of houses, where was the truck parked in reference to that?
If she was in the first one, then the truck would have been parked looking toward the east. It would have been slightly south of where her condo would be.
So if you were to walk out her front door, would you be looking sort of right at the truck?
Well, not right at it, but you would have to look more to the right if you were walking out of her condo, if her condo is facing Retreat View Circle.
Okay, because that would then put the truck parked on the curb as you would walk out her front door, it would be parked to the curb on the right-hand side of that street?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you say Retreat View Circle. Is that the street that actually circles around, or is the perimeter of the complex itself?
It does.
Okay. Is Miss Lauer actually on a street that comes off of Retreat View Circle?
If I'm visualizing exactly where you're talking about. I believe her condo would be facing Retreat View Circle, yes.
Okay. How would it be, the front door, if I walked straight out her front door, would I eventually walk right into the clubhouse area?
No, you would have to walk down the street to the west.
Okay. Let's talk then about wherever the truck was located. You saw it in reference to the crime scene, you saw it in that area?
Yes,
Okay. And we may come back to a map in a minute and see if we can show you a map of the area. But let's
Okay.
move to the point where you came up to the area where the crime scene was. Describe what you first saw.
there were quite a few people standing on the sidewalk. There were people who were closer down to where the yellow tape was. And I kind of looked around, to see if I saw George, because I saw his truck. And after I didn't see him, then I recognized the lady from one of the HOA meetings, and I asked her what happened. And she said, I believe,
Objection.
Ma'am?
For just 1 second.
Ms. Delegard, when you hear one of us say an objection, that means the court has to inquire. So I just hold on to your testimony for 1 second. You didn't do anything wrong. Just want to check with the court.
Okay, what is the objection?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained as to what somebody else said.
Your Honor. Did you know the person's name who you spoke to?
I don't know her. All I know is she's from Pembroke Pines.
Okay. So you had a conversation with her about the events that she perceived?
I simply asked what was going on,
Okay.
and that was her reply to me.
Okay. And at some point then, did you speak to any law enforcement officers?
After I could not find, or after I didn't see George, I did attempt to talk to some of the other residents that was there. And after I felt like, well, okay, I'm not in harm's way, I was walking away and a policeman came up and said to me, "You don't want to talk to me." And I turned around and I said, "I don't know what I can tell you because I wasn't here when anything happened."
Okay. And then what did the law enforcement officer say to you?
He then replied, "Well, we're trying to find someone who may know the people involved in the shooting."
Okay. And did he have any further conversation with you or show you anything?
He just asked me would I mind staying up, and he was going to go and take a picture and bring it back to the group of us that were standing there to see if we could recognize either the victim and or the suspect.
Did that officer happen to identify himself to you by name that you can recall?
He did not, and I'm usually pretty perceptive to look at a name badge, but, with everything going on, I don't remember.
Okay. So at some point then, did he show you a picture or two of people who were involved in this event?
He came back with what I believe was an iPhone, and I'm only saying that because I own one, with 2 pictures.
Okay.
And I, along with the others standing there.
Let me interrupt for a moment to ask you if you could identify either by name or by description the other people who were present during that time.
There was a young Caucasian man. I can't remember his name. It was either Jeremy or Jonathan.
Okay.
And then there was a couple there. They were married, but I did not get their names.
Okay. And were they then present when this picture or these pictures were shown?
They were.
Okay. Were you able to identify anybody in either of those 2 pictures?
Yes, I was.
And who was that?
That was George Zimmerman, my neighbor.
Okay. We have seen those pictures here quite a bit in the courtroom. I'm not going to show it to you directly right now unless I have to, but was that a picture where Mr. Zimmerman had a bloodied nose?
He did have a bloody nose, yes.
Okay. And there was describe the difference, if any, you saw between the picture that you saw that night and the George Zimmerman who you knew before that night.
His nose was very bloody, and to me, it looked very disfigured, like it was, let's see, I'm looking at him, so then it looked like it was somewhat to the left or right, but I know it was not the way I knew him. His face was the nose was very disfigured and a lot of blood coming from it.
Okay. Did it take you a minute or two, or how long did it take you to even figure out that that was the same person?
I mean, his face still looked the same. The only difference was the disfigurement and the blood in his nose.
Did you advise the law enforcement officer who was present of this person, George Zimmerman's name?
Yes, I said, that's my neighbor George.
Okay. And did anybody else, as you can best recall, identify the person as well?
Objection as to hearsay.
Sustained.
Don't answer that. After you identified George Zimmerman as the person in the picture, were you shown a second picture?
I was.
And now was that anyone who you identified?
I did not know the person's name. I had seen him in passing probably earlier that day, but I mean, I didn't know who he was.
Okay. And do you know now that that person was Trayvon Martin?
Yes.
After then you identified George Zimmerman, what was the next thing that you did, or who'd you talk to about that event?
Are you talking about that night?
Yes, ma'am.
If I can remember correctly, I think the first concern was where his wife was, if his wife was there.
Okay, was that your concern, you mean?
Yes, because I mean, I knew he was married and I didn't see her, and they're my neighbors, and once I saw his face and what looked to be, been hurt, my first concern is, where's his next of kin, his wife?
Okay, and what'd you do about that?
Well, after, there was nothing else I could do at that point. Once I found out that, as I thought, I was no longer in harm's way because my husband was out of town, I went back down to my house, parked in my driveway, got out of the car, and went up to George's residence and knocked on the door to see if Shelley was there. I rang the doorbell, I knocked, I heard the dog, but nobody came to the door. Shortly thereafter, Shelley pulled up behind, perpendicular to the driveway. She didn't pull in because I was walking away. And she asked me, where is...
Your Honor, I would ask to be heard on that hearsay objection, if need be. It's not all for the truth of the matter of what Ms. Zimmerman may have said, but it just sets the
Well, I don't want speaking responses. Please approach.
Yes, Your Honor. Perfect. Thank you very much for the patience. Well, I think we were talking about that you had a conversation with Shelley Zimmerman.
Yes, a brief conversation.
And after that, what did Ms. Zimmerman do?
Once I concluded my conversation, she sped off around to the crime scene.
Okay. Now, I may have taken you out of time a little bit. I want to go back. When you were there with the police, well, let me ask you this. Did you go back to the area of the event at all that night?
Yes, I did go back down there to make sure she was okay.
Okay.
But didn't see her, so I got back in my car and I went home.
Okay. My understanding was that you were present during, that you were questioned by law enforcement to the extent that you've told us about. Were you present during any other witnesses' discussions with law enforcement?
Yes, the young man that was there alone, and then the other couple spoke to the policeman in terms of what they knew.
Okay. I don't want you to tell us precisely what you heard them say, because law enforcement may have already testified to that, but were you there when those people gave their statements to law enforcement?
I was there when they gave their verbal statement, but I was there when they did their written statement.
Okay. I'm going to ask you if you could be a bit more precise. I know that you don't recall names. I believe you said one might have been Jeremy and another one Jonathan. Was that correct?
That's what I think I remember about the names, but again, I'm just not sure.
That's fine. But do you recall, were there 3 people? I think you said 1 female and 2 males, or were there any more than that who gave their verbal statements to law enforcement in your presence?
In my presence, there was a couple, a male and a female, and then there was a gentleman who was by himself.
Okay. Did you give any verbal, except for what we've talked about so far, did you give any verbal or written statements to the police that night?
No, other than he asked me my name, and I gave it to him, and I gave him my phone number.
Okay. And then, and now I think we'll go back to the time when you left the area of the event first, ran into Miss Zimmerman, went back looking for her, didn't find her, and left the second time?
Correct.
Okay. At some point then, did you give statements to law enforcement regarding what you knew or heard about the event?
Yes, there was an FBI agent who left a card on my door and requested I call him. So I called.
Okay.
And he and another agent came to my house and interviewed me.
And you gave them a statement about whatever information they asked you about, I presume?
That is correct.
Okay. At some point, did you have an opportunity to listen to what we call, and have been calling during this trial, the Lauer 911 tape? And for your purposes, that is the tape that has the this voices in the background screaming for help. Have you had an opportunity to listen to that?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell me the circumstances or the setting around the first time that you listened to it?
The first time that I heard it was when it was played on one of the local news channels.
Okay. Were you by yourself or with anyone else?
You know, I don't remember.
Okay. How many times have you listened to the tape?
Besides that time, well, it was played over and over, but I would probably say maybe 2 or 3 times.
Okay. Did you hear a voice screaming for help in the background that you were able to recognize or identify?
I heard the voice screaming in the background, and of the 2 that we are discussing, the deceased Trayvon and George, I've only heard George talk.
Okay. Whose voice do you believe that was in the background screaming for help?
Based on the fact that I've only heard George's voice, and it's a light male voice, I would say that it was his,
And by his, you mean whom?
George Zimmerman.
And when you say you've heard him talk, tell us again about how long you've known him.
By that time, it was 2.5 years.
Okay. An opportunity to hear him both speak to you and speak to others in your presence?
That is correct.
Ever hear him yell for his dog or laugh at a joke or anything like that you can recall?
Never heard him yell at the dog. I mean, whatever commands he gave the dog were very, you know, just like a voice talking to someone next to you. But again, from what I heard, he has a light male voice.
Okay. I'm going to ask you then, I'm going to try something that may work. I'm going to show you an exhibit. It states Exhibit 1, and just see if there's any chance that this can be done in a way where you can identify the picture. And then we'll have you try and walk us through a location where you may have seen George Zimmerman's truck, okay? So
Okay.
what you're seeing now should be blocked pretty soon by a picture. Can you see that picture?
I can see the picture.
Okay, let's just see if this works in any form or fashion.
You need to bring it up a little. It's going out of my focus.
Okay, let me try something else then.
That's better.
Okay, for you maybe. Hold on for 1 second.
Sure,
Does that work? Can you at least?
that works.
All right, I'm going to move it a little bit to an area. Okay, can you describe what is barely on the screen at this point? Can you see that?
The only thing I can see is a blue line, a little bit of grass, and the white border on the picture.
Can you see the pool that's in the center of the photo?
I can.
Hmm? No, it's not. What do you mean? Your Honor, if I might. It is. Okay. Unless we start talking about mirror images, Your Honor, that's not going to work, so I'll move on to another area of inquiry. Ms. Delegard, I'm going to try to do verbally what we were just going to do visually.
Okay.
And ask you this. You are familiar with the complex, correct?
I am.
Okay. You sort of gave us a walk or a drive-through as to how you entered into the complex. Can you tell me what entrance you came into that night?
I came in the entrance that is directly in front of Bentley Elementary School.
And is that the one that when you drive in, you have the clubhouse immediately in front of you and just to your right?
That is correct.
Okay. From that point, and I know we're testing your memory since you don't live there anymore, from that point, as you're coming in Oregon, I know that you took a sort of back route over to your complex because you took a right on Retreat View Circle, correct? When you first came in.
No, if you say the back route, then you're talking about the part of Oregon that goes up to 46A or Johnny H.E. Thomas.
Yeah, I confused it by saying that. My understanding. One moment, if I might. Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
That's okay.
All right.
I can hear.
I think I confused my question a moment ago. My understanding was that when you first came into your subdivision, you realized that there was some crime scene tape, correct?
Correct.
As you're coming into the main entrance, with the clubhouse off to your right, which way was the crime scene tape from where you were driving in?
To the left or to the east.
Okay. And that would have been, is that the normal way that you would go from that main entrance to your residence? You would go to the left?
No, I would go to the right.
Okay. All right. Now, what I would like to do is start at the Oregon main entrance with the clubhouse on your right. And if you can sort of walk or drive us to the area where you did drive up to see, to get a better view of the area of the crime scene itself?
If I were to drive in to the entrance that was directly across from Altomise Bentley Elementary, I would have made a left rather than a right to go down to where the crime scene was.
Okay. And where on that scene then would you have seen George's truck?
Oh boy, it wasn't even 3/10 of a mile down because it's not that far.
Okay. Do you have a present memory today as to where the truck was?
It was parked on Retreat View Circle, just to the left of where you're talking about the T area was.
Okay. Let me ask it this way. I'm going to refresh your recollection with some testimony potentially. Could the truck have been parked not on Retreat View Circle, but on the second street in, so that, you know the second street in I'm talking about? So if you don't take
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, you don't take
We
your first
guarantee
left onto
Aquafresh
Retreat View
Extreme
Circle, but you
Clean.
take your second left onto Twin Trees? Twin
Right,
Tree
Twin
Lane?
Trees Lane, I believe it
Okay.
is.
Could that have been the street that you turned down and saw Mr. Zimmerman's truck?
It could have been. All I know is that it was on one of those curves.
Okay, that's okay. Nonetheless, wherever that truck was, it is your testimony that it was directly in front of, maybe a touch off to the right, of what we've identified as Miss Lauer's
We guarantee
townhome?
Yes.
Okay, so if we were to use Miss Lauer's townhome as the focal point, you would walk out or look out her front door and look just to your right to see George Zimmerman's truck where it sat that night?
That is correct.
Okay. I have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions?
Okay.
I'll try and assist as best I can with the compromise and having it this way.
Okay, thank you. Cross?
I can see you through the, just beyond the little projector, yes.
Okay. I don't know if you remember me. I'm Bernie Della Rionda with the State Attorney's Office.
Yes, I do remember you.
Okay, great. I just have a few questions and then we'll get you out of here. Okay, or
Sure.
we'll leave you alone, I should say. Since you're, yes, ma'am. The bottom line is that day, you came into contact with a police officer who told you there was a suspect and a victim, showed you some photographs. You recognized one photograph as George Zimmerman. The other photograph, you didn't know the person. You now know it's Trayvon Martin, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you said you had seen him earlier the day in the retreat at Twin Lakes, correct? Just walking around?
Right.
Okay. And then finally, you were asked about the voice. You mentioned you saw it on TV, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't have a point of reference. All you knew was George Zimmerman's voice, but you had never heard Trayvon Martin's voice, correct?
That is correct. I've never heard his voice.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Any redirect?
A sick woman in her bed who came with us. I think we're done with her and do appreciate her coming.
Okay.
Ms. Delegard,
Yes.
we are done. I appreciate your time. Thanks very much for doing this from your home, and I apologize for the interruption. I hope you feel better.
It's okay. All
Thank you.
right.
May Ms. Dillagard be excused from
Yes.
being recalled?
Excused by the defense, yes. Your Honor.
Okay, you're excused. That means that you don't have to appear again. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, and when you're finished with that, if you'll approach for just one moment.
parts